As usual, we ask that you refrain from taking any photos, screenshots, or recordings of the call without the express permission of the AGJC. For a roundup of recent calls, you can check out the AGJC YouTube channel. And with those preliminaries out the way, over to Huda to introduce this week's call.
Welcome to the AGJC's weekly pre-Shabbat Zoom. Thank you, Jake, for your introduction. And I just want to say that yesterday we were at the AGJC second anniversary for the Abraham Accords, and it was an amazing dinner. We really enjoyed it. So each week we gather together, the Jewish communities of all six GCC countries and our families and friends from around the world to hear an inspirational message before Shabbat, light candles, hear a Dvar Torah from Rabbi Abadi, pray and read a section from the weekly Torah portion. This summer, Yariv Becher, Vice President of Startup Nation Central, and his team hosted a meeting with Bahrain's ambassador to Israel and the EDB, where they met with 15 Israeli startups and discussed setting up a regional R&D hub in Bahrain. I was so excited to hear about this meeting and tweeted about it. And a few days later, SNC's publicist, who happens to be on this call, and we all know her very well, Ariella, mentioned that Yariv would be coming to Bahrain and asked if I'd like to meet with him. We had a wonderful conversation where we discussed the opportunities for technology to bring together our region and especially Bahrain and Israel. I am excited to hear more from Yariv today. The Association of Gulf Jewish Communities is the umbrella organization for the Jewish communities of the GCC countries that are building and enhancing Jewish life in the region. While each community is independent, we share a common goal and vision for Jewish life to flourish in the Gulf for the benefit of both residents and visitors. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you will join us next week as well. To stay updated on AGJC events, please follow us on Twitter at Gulf Jewish and visit our website, www.gulfjewish.org. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom from Abu Dhabi.
Thank you, Huda. For candle lighting this week, it's great to have Efrat with us.
A warm Shabbat Shalom from London, everyone, and happy anniversary on the Abraham Accords. Looking forward to being in the Gulf very soon. And I'll go ahead and light the candles. ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו מצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת קודש. Shabbat Shalom.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Great to have you with us, Efrat. Singing Yedid Nefesh and Lechadodi this week. Alex, over to you.
So hello, everybody. It was such a pleasure seeing some of you that I see every afternoon on the Zoom, to see you in live yesterday in Abu Dhabi. Nothing better than a real meeting. So, Jake, am I doing Lechadodi and Yedid Nefesh? Yeah?
I believe so. We'll be honored.
Yedid Nefesh Avraham Meshochadecha El Retzonecha Yarotz Avdecha Kemo Ayal Ishtachaveh Elimol Adarecha Yerav Lo Yedidotecha Mino Fetzo Vecholetam Adonai Ziva Olam Nafshi Cholata Vatecha Ana Ena Refana La Be'ad Lano Amsi Vechas Titchazek V'tidrape Ve'ayta La Simcha תמונת עולם, ותקיה אמונה, רחמך וחוסנה לבין אהובך, כי זה כמה נחשפתי, לרוב תפארת עוזך, אליך חמדה ליבי, וחוסנה ואל תתעלם. תגלנה ופרוס חביבי עלי את צוקת שלומך, תאיר ארץ מלמודך, נגילה ונשמחה בך, מהר אהוב כי במועד, וכוננו כי ימי עולם. תלי לי 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 לי, תלי לי 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 לי, תלי לי 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 לה 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 לי, תלי לי 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 לי, תלי לי 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 לי, תלי לי 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 לי. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שמו וזכו בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכוון אליך, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוך, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, כה מקציים מתוך אפיך, רהב לך שבט בימי קבחה, ויהיו יחמול עלייך חמלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרצי, ואת אדוני תריצי על יד איש, בין פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני ים סגולה. בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
Thank you, Alex. Introducing our guest speaker for the week, over to Ariella.
Thanks, Jake. When we talk about the Abraham Accords, we often talk about diplomacy in the sense of government to government. But Yariv Becher and Startup Nation Central, a Tel Aviv-based nonprofit organization that promotes Israeli innovation around the world, have created a whole new type of diplomacy, and that's innovation diplomacy. Working with government partners in Bahrain, Morocco, and the UAE, Yariv and his team identify common challenges that Israel and its fellow Accord countries can collaborate on to find solutions. Just last week, SNC signed an MOU with AGJC, Abu Dhabi's leading international financial center, to advance collaborations between the innovation ecosystems of Israel and the United Arab Emirates. In July, they held a meeting with Bahrain's ambassador to Israel and the Economic Development Board, which Huda mentioned earlier. And in May, SNC held the Morocco-Israel Connect to Innovate conference in Casablanca, which brought together government officials and 250 business leaders from the two countries and focused on ways to collaborate in the agri-tech, water tech, energy, logistics, and human capital sectors. As VP of Innovation Diplomacy, Yariv manages Startup Nation Central's relations with government partners around the globe, overseeing a team of regional managers with a focus on the US, the MENA countries, and developing countries. Yariv employs the skills he gained during his 13 years in public service at the Ministry of Economy and Industry to enable Israeli technology companies to penetrate foreign markets and expand their international business operations. He previously served as the commercial attaché to the UK and in the Midwest for all of us from the US. Yariv, thank you for speaking with us today about the incredible work that you and your team are doing.
Thank you, Ariela. I mean, with that introduction, I'm not sure there's much more that I can add. But first, I want to say thank you, Huda, for really inviting me to take part, and Ariela and Esti for our team for organizing this. And really, it's very exciting. I had the pleasure, Huda invited me to the last meeting, so I was peeking in, and it was very exciting and very moving. So I'm happy to be here. What we're going to do over the next 10 minutes is I'll give you a sort of a snapshot of the Israeli innovation ecosystem very briefly, so you understand the context, and then we'll talk a bit about SNC in general and dive into innovation diplomacy with a few examples. And I'm happy to connect afterwards with whoever's interested to learn more, or perhaps if there are any opportunities that you would want to explore. So first of all, just really a few sentences about the innovation ecosystem in Israel. So over the past 30 years, Israel has really become one of the centers of innovation around the world, really a global hub for tech activity. Today, we have over 7,000 different entities in the innovation ecosystem, spanning from startups to multinational companies through Israeli growth companies and large corporations, venture capitals, local venture capital firms, and of course, a lot of foreign venture capital that's active in Israel. We have over 450 multinational companies that have activity in Israel. And when we say that, it's important to emphasize, we talk about innovation activity and not just a back office or a call center or sales and marketing, but actual innovation activity from an R&D center to an open innovation lab, different models. Israel has the tech industry in Israel in 2020 raised over $10 billion, which was a record year and was really impressive. And we thought that there's little chance that we'd be able to exceed that. In 2021, the industry raised over $27 billion, which is an amazing growth rate and much higher than other countries. And over the first 6 months of 2022, we already exceeded $10 billion. So although we're going through some sort of a period of instability, we still see that the ecosystem is resilient and stable and is growing. So that's a snapshot of the ecosystem, but it's important when we talk about it not to say that everything is all rosy, and perhaps to mention a few challenges that we have, sort of to put things into perspective and to make it a bit more credible. So I mentioned, first of all, the amount of venture capital that was raised in Israel. That actually creates a problem because a lot of these companies now are expected to grow very rapidly, and the pool of tech talent in Israel is limited. There's you can, although it's difficult, but you can grow investments exponentially. It's much harder to grow tech talent exponentially. And so that's one of the...
I'm just gonna let it play until we get into the car. So.
Okay. So that's a challenge that we're trying to overcome. The other one is that we're seeing that the number of new startups open or created every year is going down. That is an issue to look at, not necessarily a reason, something for concern. There might be good reasons for that. We see more mature companies, and so less quick exits that their founders open new startups, but actually we see companies grow, so the cycle is becoming much larger. And the other one, which is, or the last main challenge that Israel has, is the disconnect between the innovation ecosystem, which we talked about, which is very impressive, and the rest of the economy. We actually have a situation of a dual economy. Those that are not connected to the innovation activity, to the tech scene, are not necessarily benefiting from that growth. And that actually is one of the things that we at SNC are trying to tackle. So now I'll share with you a bit what SNC does, and then we'll talk about innovation diplomacy. So SNC, Startup Nation Central, was created about 10 years ago. Next year, we're going to celebrate our first decade with the main goal of strengthening the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem in Israel, understanding that that is one of the major pillars for a strong economy, for strong Israel. And the way to do that is to help the ecosystem connect with multinational companies, foreign investors, to help them navigate through the ecosystem, to find their opportunities, to help them invest, to perhaps attract them to open an R&D center in Israel, some sort of innovation activity. That's what we've been doing over the past 10 years. I mentioned before one of the issues that we have with the dual economy. So actually one of our targets for next year is to add another pillar of activity, which is called Innovation for Israel, and that's to connect between the two different economies. So following the signing of the Abraham Accords, we at SNC realized that in order for it not to remain just a diplomatic agreement and to have just diplomatic relations, but really create strong ties, there needs to be economic exchange, and that needs to be based on innovation, because this is what Israel brings to the table. This is the asset that we have. And so in innovation diplomacy, we're looking at the ecosystem not as a goal that we need to work towards, but actually as an asset that we can leverage to strengthen Israel's relations with areas of strategic importance. And our main focus now is on the MENA region, Abraham Accord countries, also countries with which we had relations in the past, like Egypt and Jordan, and we're also doing things with the Palestinian Authority. And so what we do is we look at these countries as our partners to understand what are the main challenges that they have, the main goals that they would want to achieve, that Israeli innovation can play a part in achieving those goals in a way that we would create impact that would then be attributed to Israel and to Israeli innovation. So the peoples of these countries understand what is the benefit of having the relationship with Israel and what comes out of it for them. And that will also show other countries with which we don't have relations with yet, what is the benefit for them, why they should be encouraged to have normalization with Israel. A few examples of things that we're doing. So first of all, I mentioned one of the main challenges that the ecosystem has, and that is the shortage of human capital. But we're seeing that in countries like Bahrain, like the Emirates, like Morocco, they have each country from a different angle, but they all have a goal of attracting companies to open up an activity there and to employ local developers. So for example, in Morocco, one of the things that they raised, a main challenge that they have is brain drain. They have a lot of graduates that come out of the universities and don't have high-paying jobs or don't have jobs that are related to what they studied. So they either leave the country to go work somewhere else, or they don't work in the profession that they acquired. And so if we can bring Israeli companies to employ this tech talent and to create high-paying jobs, that really would create an impact over there, would help them also with their goal of creating an innovation ecosystem. And that would be then later attributed to Israel. And that leads me to one of the other things that we're working on, and that is we see a lot of interest from these countries in the Israeli story of our own development of an innovation ecosystem. When they look at us, they see a story that they can relate to. It's not like the Silicon Valley that has been active for many years, but really a country that up until 30 years ago wasn't very different and is now really an innovation, knowledge-driven economy. And so they want to learn from this story and to see what lessons they can take and then implement. And we're working with them. We're in touch with the Ministry of Industry and Commerce of the Kingdom of Bahrain to work with them on creating their innovation strategy. And the same thing we're doing with Morocco. Ariela mentioned the conference that we held in May in Morocco. During that conference, we actually held a workshop for about 3 hours with experts that we brought from Israel that work at SNC. And we did a workshop with executives from leading government agencies about creating and building an innovation strategy. Last thing I would want to share with you before we end is an initiative that we have to create regional collaboration in innovation around climate. Climate is one of the shared challenges that we have in the region that is affecting everyone. And the way to address that is only through collaboration. And what Israel brings to the table, again, is innovation. So we want to create a forum where we can bring stakeholders, startups, investors, corporations, bring them around the table to agree on what are the 3-4 main shared challenges that we have in the region, and then work together to spur joint projects to develop technology that would address these challenges that would be implemented regionally. We are working towards COP27 that's going to take place in Sharm el-Sheikh in 2 months. That's the UN Climate Change Conference. And we're going to launch that initiative there and then work towards COP28 that's going to be in Abu Dhabi, and then come and share hopefully our successes and the change that we have been able to promote. So really that's happening in our region, and we think that's a great opportunity to move forward. Again, I hope I created some sort of interest, and if anyone wants to follow up later and have any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Any opportunities that come up, we'd be happy to explore. And of course, when you're in Israel, let us know. We'd be happy to host you in our offices and show you what we're doing. Thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah, Riv, thank you so much. It's often we hear a lot of the political and diplomatic successes of recent years, which are to be celebrated, but it's really amazing to hear about the tachlis of what it actually means and the unique startup culture of Israel that's able to contribute to innovation diplomacy. And we wish you Mazal Tov, Mabruk on the 10 years of SNC coming up, 10-year anniversary coming up next year. And lots of Hatzlacha for everything you do going forward. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Rabbi Abadi, please.
Yes, thank you, Jake, and thank you, Yariv, for the beautiful presentation. It opens up our minds more as to what Israel is doing and where it's going. That's wonderful. I want to take also the opportunity to welcome the AGJC delegation to the Emirates and to the Gulf. And it was really a pleasure to be with you last night in Abu Dhabi at the delicious dinner. Jason, thank you for greeting us. And certainly it was a pleasure to be with you 2-3 days ago here in Dubai. I hope your stay and your trip here in the Emirates have been thrilling, very informative, and it has reached more than the expectation that you had. And so now about the message of the Shabbat of the week. What would we say if we would be asked to encapsulate our life story, either as individuals, as a family, as a community, or even as a people or a nation, in just few sentences? We are told, please tell me about your life story in few sentences, your ups and downs, your failures and your successes, and what brought you to this moment that you find yourself in. So I bet most of us will have difficulty in encapsulating such a life story in just 3-4 sentences. What would we say? The good, the bad, what was that? The good, the bad, and the ugly. From where would we start? From the beginning, from the middle, from what makes us feel good, or what makes us feel bad? And so it's definitely a practice that that is not that easy to do. The parasha this week, Parashat Ki Tavo, indeed does that. It kind of encapsulates in 3 to 4 sentences the story of our people and our nation. Parashat Ki Tavo begins with a tradition that took place when the temple was erected, the first and the second temple in Jerusalem, where by the season of the holiday of Shavuot, which is the beginning of the summer, where all the farmers, people who had vineyards and orchards and all kind of fruit, would bring the best, what we call them the reshit, the primacy or the prime fruit after 5 years, actually, if there are trees, and they would bring them into the temple and they would give it to the Kohen, to the priest family there, and they would recite that encapsulated 3-4 sentences about the story. And so they begin, and I'm going to do it just very, very quickly. So they begin, our forefather was a wandering Aramean resident that lived in Aram. That was our forefather Jacob. And then they went down to Egypt. He went down to Egypt. He became a great nation. And then in Egypt, they made us suffer. This is ancient Egypt, of course. They made us suffer. They afflicted us. They oppressed us. And then we cried to God the Almighty, and he heard our cry, and he saw our oppression, and he saved us, right? He saved us with a stretched arm, with miracles, and it goes out of Egypt, and he brought us to this place, right? That was Israel, the land of Israel, and therefore I am bringing this beautiful fruit, this beautiful primary harvest, primacy of the harvest as a thanksgiving. And so 3-4 sentences, it encapsulates the story of our people, but the idea is to be grateful. That's the idea. That whole story that lasted, at least by the time these people brought these promises to the temple, it lasted at least 1,000 years. It was a story of 1,000 years until they were able to do it. And yet, when they show an act of gratitude for everything that happened during those years, not just the wonders and the miracles that occurred as we exited Egypt, or what took place in the desert, or when we entered the land, but also the oppression, the affliction, the slavery, the famines that had occurred, the hunger, the battles. And so we get the idea that we ought to be grateful to the Almighty for the good and for the bad. Because in fact, our sages say that really what we think it's bad at that moment that it occurred to us, but it's actually something good for the future. In a sense, later on, sometimes when we look back and we see the greatest challenges that we had in life, and at that moment we were suffering and going through hardship, but yet years later when we look back, we say, wow, that was the path to achieve greatness, in a sense, to succeed more. And yes, during that moment, we felt bad and we kind of suffer maybe, but we realized that at the end, it was for something good. So when we are grateful for something, we ought to think about what is it that brought us to that moment to be grateful. And that not only goes with the Almighty God, but with anybody who has done something good to us, with anybody who has helped us throughout our lives, that because of them or due to them, we were able to succeed and to go where we needed to go. And at that moment, we may not have been able to realize that. It is only later on in the future, as we look back and we realize, wow, that person really helped me. That person really turned the page for me. That person directed me to the right path. And so when we are grateful, we ought to remember all those things that happened to us in the past and be grateful for all of those things. We as a nation, as people, we are people that have hakarat hatov, that we recognize the good that people has done for us, and also we recognize the good in people. And that is the message of the parasha of this week, at least the beginning of the parasha, not the rest of it. At the beginning of the parasha teaches us to be grateful for our history, to be grateful for the moment that we are now, and of course, to be grateful for a wonderful future that we hope to have. And as a grateful nation, as a grateful people, this is a mark of who we are and what our people is all about. From Abraham all the way to our time, we always have been known to be a grateful nation. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Abadi. We are all grateful and full of gratitude for your insights on the Pasha this week and every week. Alex, over to you to read from a section from the Pasha, and then Esti will provide an English translation for us.
והיה אם שמוע תשמור בקול אדוני אלוהיך לשמור לעשות את כל מצוותיו אשר אנוכי מצווך היום ונתנך אדוני אלוהיך עליון על כל גויי הארץ ובאו עליך כל הברכות האלה והשיגוך כי תשמע בקול אדוני אלוהיך ברוך אתה בעיר וברוך אתה בשדה ברוך פרי בטנך ופרי אדמתך ופרי בהמתך שגר על אפיך והשטרות צונך ברוך תנך ומשרתך ברוך אתה בבואך ברוך אתה בצאתך.
Now, if you obey your God to observe faithfully all the divine commandments which I enjoin upon you this day, your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. All this blessing shall come upon you and take effect if you will heed the word of your God. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. Blessed shall you be your issue from the womb, your product from the soil, and the offspring of your cattle, the calving of your herd, and the lambing of your flock. Blessed shall you be in your basket and your kneading bowl. Blessed shall you be in your comings, and blessed shall you be in your goings.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Esti. Now, reading the prayer for peace and the prayer for the GCC countries this week, we now go to Aviva.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Prayer for peace. Lord of peace, divine ruler, to whom peace belongs, master of peace, creator of all things, may it be your will to put an end to war and bloodshed on earth, and to spread a great and wonderful peace over the whole world. Help us and save us all, and let us cling tightly to the virtue of peace. Let there be a truly great peace between every person and their fellow, and let there be no discord between people, even in their hearts. Let us never shame any person on earth, great or small. May it be granted unto us to fulfill thy commandment, to love thy neighbor as thyself, with all our hearts and souls and bodies and possessions. God, who is peace, bless us with peace. May he who gives salvation to kings and dominion to princes, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, who delivers his servant David from the evil sword, who makes a way in the sea and a path through the mighty waters, bless and protect, guard and help, exalt, magnify, and uplift His Majesty the King of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty the King of Bahrain, His Majesty the Sultan of Oman, His Highness the President of the UAE, His Highness the Emir of Kuwait, and His Highness the Emir of Qatar, and all of their crown princes. And may the Supreme King of Kings, in his mercy, put a spirit of wisdom and understanding into their hearts, and the hearts of all their counselors and officials, to deal kindly with us, the house of Jacob, and all the people of this land. Be their shelter and stronghold, and let them not falter. In their days and in ours, may these lands be blessed with stability, prosperity, and peace. May this be his will, and let us say amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Amen. Thanks, Aviva. Now, numerous people on the call have already mentioned the incredible gathering that took place last night in Abu Dhabi, organized by AGJC to commemorate the second anniversary of the Abraham Accords. I was also privileged to be in attendance, and it was great to meet people in person that I had previously only known through a screen. And one of these people, Rob Skolnick, is going to provide a short update on the AGJC mission so far for us. Rob, we just need you to unmute, please.
Sorry about that. I thought it was unmuted. As you said, as Alex said, and Rabbi Buddy, it was such a pleasure for a number of us to meet some of the folks we've known for years now in little boxes. And it was great. And of course, always wonderful to see Huda and to share and celebrate as we did last night. So we've had an amazing week this past week in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And for the newly formed AGJC Arabian Gulf Institute, there was a visit in Bahrain as well. Amazing meetings. The celebration of the 2-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords last night was it felt historic, frankly. It was miraculous to walk into the room and see on every table Israel, the United States, and the United Arab Emirates. That alone was just to set the stage for an amazing evening at the Diplomatic Academy here in Abu Dhabi, where we had met with students, young diplomats in training, forging relationships that I think will last and hopefully provide fruit for many years to come. We've had amazing ministerial meetings, briefings, for example, on the Abrahamic family house here in Abu Dhabi. That is another miracle. It's getting ready to open over the next year, I guess. And it really is just a breathtaking expression that we all hope the world takes notice of and emulates. Just breathtaking to see the dynamism, the leadership, the vision of the leaders of the Emirates of Bahrain, and to continue the work we're doing to advocate on Israel's behalf for the success of the Accords and for the deepening of all relationships. We're having Shabbat, obviously, tonight together here in Abu Dhabi, and then most of us will be heading home, but we'll be back soon for sure. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks for the update, Rob, and thanks to everyone from the delegation who's able to join the call today. For those who don't know, AGJC has been a long-standing partner of Jewish communities in the region, and we look forward to continuing that close partnership and working together moving forwards. To sing us out with Shalom Aleichem, Steve, please.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem LeShalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni LeShalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, ממלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, צאתכם לשלום מלכי השלום, מלכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, בשבתכם לשלום מלכי השלום, מלכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שבת שלום.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. And the
Shabbat
AGJC delegation, I'll see you later.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. From Abu Dhabi.
Shabbat Shalom as well.
See you soon.
Shabbat Shalom.
Bye.
Thank you, Jake.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom להתראות.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.